Thanks everybody for joining us. Give us 1 second to connect to Facebook. So thanks for your patience. We'll begin in just 30 seconds. All right, Mark, go ahead.
Great, thank you, John. And good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming today. My name is Mark Shebas. I'm a senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC. And I'm here today on behalf of the Pennsylvania Clean Power Coalition, which is a group of clean energy business, faith, and community leaders committed to protecting Pennsylvania's environment and powering its economy through clean energy. I'm joined today by 2 Pennsylvania community members and 4 state legislators. And we're here to talk about the Department of Environmental Protection's regulatory rulemaking to limit carbon dioxide pollution from power plants and enable Pennsylvania to participate in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. We wanted to call this press conference because next week we expect the DEP to release final regulatory language for its RGGI rulemaking. After that, it'll be presented to various DEP advisory bodies. And then this summer, it'll go in front of the Environmental Quality Board for advancement into the final stages of the rulemaking procedure. Before I turn to our speakers, I wanted to sort of set the stage a little bit for this rulemaking. Between 2004 and 2008, goes back a long time, Pennsylvania was taking some pretty aggressive steps regarding clean energy. In retrospect, they're not so aggressive, but at the time they were relatively aggressive. In 2004, the state enacted an alternative energy portfolio standard to boost renewable energy. In 2008, the state enacted Act 129 to boost energy efficiency. And in 2008, also, the state enacted the 2008 Climate Change Act, which doesn't force any action. And since then, the General Assembly, unfortunately, has not taken much action, notwithstanding the best efforts of the climate champion legislators we have today. So we are heartened that the Wolf administration has taken action using its existing legal authority to reduce carbon pollution from power plants. The final regulatory language that we expect next week follows probably the most extensive and accessible DEP public comment period that we've seen to date. Last fall and last winter, the DEP held 10 public hearings. 449 people testified. Of those, 431 provided supportive testimony. The DEP received over 14,000 written comments, over 95% of which were positive, again, in support of the DEP's moving forward with this program. Since the comment period, the DEP has been working on revisions to the proposed regulation, and it's that language that we expect to come out very soon. And then the changes that the DEP is making were previewed at a meeting last month of the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee, and then they'll be released and explained more in depth at the next meeting next month. RGGI is not the only policy that Pennsylvania needs to equitably address climate change in Pennsylvania. We realize there's a lot more. But RGGI does a lot and has a proven record of success. So we're heartened again to see the Wolf administration moving forward with it. RGGI has a proven record of success in slashing pollution, in protecting public health, and investing in communities. So the Clean Power Coalition is excited to see the DEP moving forward with finalizing the regulatory language. And we're eager to work with the DEP to help it develop an investment strategy for the RGGI auction proceeds that will prioritize the Pennsylvania communities most in need, specifically environmental justice communities and communities affected by the ongoing transition away from the coal economy and other fossil fuels. With that, I will turn to our speakers today. I'll briefly introduce them and then turn it over to the first. We're joined today first by Mark Dugan, a father and lifelong resident of Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, who's had many family members work in Greene County as coal miners. We're joined by Sofia Portillo, a youth representative from the community organization CASA, based in York, Pennsylvania. We're joined by Senator Carolyn Comita from Chester County, the minority chair of the Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. We're joined by Representative Leanne Krueger from Delaware County, by Representative Donna Bullock of Philadelphia, and by Representative Greg Vitale of Montgomery and Delaware counties, the minority chair of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. So again, thank you all for coming today. I will now turn it over to Mr. Dugan for his remarks.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Mark Dugan. Like you said, I'm a resident of Cannonsburg in Washington County, and I'm a member of the Center for Coalfield Justice. The Center for Coalfield Justice is an environmental and economic justice advocacy organization in southwestern Pennsylvania that works to improve the economy and the environment. And I want to say thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. I appreciate it. I've lived in southwestern Pennsylvania my entire life. My family and ancestors all lived in Greene County and worked as coal miners. My grandfather in particular was a miner, mine engineer, and foreman for Dugan Light until his retirement in the 1990s. Coal mining was not only a source of income for him, but a way of life for him and many others in the region. This way of life came at a price, though, both economically and physically. In 2003, my grandfather, like many others, passed away because of black lung complications. For decades, coal communities have seen a gradual decrease in population size and economic opportunities. Living in southwestern PA, I can see the immediate need for economic and job security. During a budget town hall in Greene County last fall, it was shared by the county commissioners that local tax revenue could decrease upwards of 15% with continued decline of the coal industry. Our community's economic opportunities are declining whether or not RGGI would be enacted, but it is critical that through this regulation, the government ensures that environmental justice communities are not burdened even more by pollution trading. Then the legislative body and the governor must work together to use the revenue generated from the cap and invest policy to support workers in transition, communities experiencing tax loss, and seeing this as an opportunity to invest in an already crumbling economy. Pennsylvania lawmakers have an opportunity to be a leader in the Northeast by joining RGGI and implementing the program that truly centers workers and environmental justice communities by setting the standard for our neighboring states that the revenue generated from RGGI must be used to improve the communities most impacted by pollution and single source economies. These funds should not go to false solutions to the climate crisis or for political favors. Frontline communities impacted by fossil fuel operations do not have the resources to diversify their economies and cover the tax loss of the decades of these companies extracting our resources and labor. RGGI proceeds can be reinvested to ease that transition and to build a clean economy for the future. We should not miss out on the opportunity to clean up the environment while creating thousands of durable, family-sustaining jobs. When Pennsylvania adopts RGGI, I'm asking our elected officials to ensure that the state allocates the appropriate RGGI funds into communities such as mine. As a father, I want to make sure that my child's school is open and she has adequate educational opportunities. I'm asking my elected officials to ensure that these funds be invested back into historically disadvantaged communities and that locally family-owned businesses can thrive in my hometown. It is imperative for the General Assembly and the governor to come together to implement RGGI to protect our communities from further environmental harm and pass legislation to ensure that the revenue generated will provide economic prosperity for coal fields for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We will turn now to Sofia. Sofia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sofia Portillo. I'm 17 years old and I live in York, and I'm also a proud member of CASA. For those of you who don't know what CASA is, we're an organization that unites Latino, immigrant, and working class communities to fight for economic, racial, and climate justice in Southeast and Central Pennsylvania. I'm the daughter of an immigrant, so I am well aware of the intersection between climate and immigration. And as a young Latina, I'm extremely worried about how the current climate crisis we live in today is shaping my life now and how it will shape my future. As it says in our Commonwealth Constitution, Citizens of this Commonwealth have an absolute right to clean air, pure water, preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of this environment. But my question is, why is this standard that's expected not being upheld? In our communities, the water and walls are infested with lead. Lead is in our houses, it's in our schools, and it's poisoning young students like myself. The quality of air in York County is one of the worst in the state. Teenagers have to worry about housing and food insecurity as our parents are unable to earn an adequate salary. I am well aware of how climate change disproportionately affects Brown and Black communities, not just in our cities, but all around the world. This demands our attention, and it must be stopped. Clean air and water should not be a concern for families like yours or mine. At 17 years old, I should be worried about what my next steps in life will be, not being held back by ill access to basic human needs. I could keep talking about several issues that my community faces. However, today, I want to talk about the solutions. Young communities of color are in dire need of a solution. Action needs to be taken, and it needs to be taken now. I believe in RGGI, and I want this program in Pennsylvania, but I also believe that this project should prioritize communities that are disproportionately affected by climate change. We need more green spaces in our cities, solar power infrastructure, lead removal, home weatherization, and clean energy programs to educate communities about the importance of using 100% clean energy. To conclude, RGGI is a good step in the right direction, and it's extremely important that we do it right, focusing on equity and investing in Brown and Black communities on the front lines. Thank you so much for your time and this opportunity.
Thank you, Sophia. We'll turn now to Senator Carolyn Comida, Chair of the Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committee.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Also, many thanks to the Pennsylvania Clean Power Coalition, the Natural Resources Defense Council, my colleagues from the House, and all who are speaking today. And Sophia, thank you so much for being here with us today, because we are shaping your future. And your words and your actions are the key to shaping that healthy future. So thank you. When we talk about RGGI, we're talking about the future. We're talking about the world that we will leave to our children and our grandchildren. We're talking about the health of our communities and our planet. Climate change is the existential crisis of our time. It is happening now. We are living it. Every day, its impacts grow more severe, and the need to act grows more urgent. RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, is the way forward for Pennsylvania communities, workers, and families. Our environment, our public health, and our economic health are all intertwined, and we'll all benefit from Pennsylvania's participation in RGGI. By linking with RGGI, according to the DEP, Pennsylvania will reduce climate pollution from carbon emissions by a massive 188 million tons by 2030. Those emissions reductions will have a real-world impact on public health, preventing as many as 639 premature deaths, as well as 30,000 hospital visits for respiratory illnesses like asthma in children and adults. In addition, the DEP estimates that participating in RGGI would lead to an increase in the gross state product of nearly $2 billion and a net increase of over 27,000 jobs by 2030. 50 years ago, on May 18th, 1971, Pennsylvania voters ratified what is now Article 1, Section 27 of our state constitution, the Environmental Rights Amendment, which says, the people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Today, as we prepare to take another major step forward for RGGI in Pennsylvania, we have an opportunity and a duty to uphold that promise. For our environment, our health, our economy, our children, our Constitution, and our future, let's make RGGI a reality. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Chair Committa. We will turn next to Representative Leanne Krueger.
Thank you so much, Mark, and good morning, everybody. My name is Leanne Krueger, and I serve as the state representative for the 161st District here in Delaware County. I've served in the State House for almost 6 years, and for that whole time, I've served as a member of both the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee and the House Labor and Industry Committee. I also chair the Blue-Green Caucus, a group of members which is working at the intersection of climate issues and job creation efforts. The reality is that climate change is already impacting Pennsylvania. We've experienced record-breaking extreme storms, serious flooding, and our agriculture and winter tourism industries have already been impacted. The need for climate action is urgent. Yet, in my time in the legislature, I have seen no bills move forward to address this serious issue. Instead, I've seen efforts by the majority party to block all climate-related bills, including recent aggressive and even unconstitutional efforts to derail RGGI. I support RGGI because I believe it's good for the environment and good for our economy. Pennsylvania's economy needs help now, and we're missing opportunities in the energy market's transformation to create new and cleaner technologies. RGGI proceeds can be directed to invest in growing our local economies and position Pennsylvania as a new energy leader. The outreach from the Department of Environmental Protection to get public comments on RGGI is unprecedented. Right now, the DEP is conducting robust stakeholder engagement to consider a wide range of investments that maximize program proceeds and reduce air pollution. The DEP is engaging with many different groups, including workers, environmental justice groups, and industry groups. The DEP has committed to developing a draft investment plan that's posted for public comment to hear from as many Pennsylvanians as possible. Meanwhile, RGGI is a bipartisan market-based cap and investment program that requires utilities to buy allowances to cover their plants' carbon pollution, which will encourage them to modernize their plants or find cleaner ways to produce energy. The proceeds from the purchase of the allowances will then be reinvested to create new jobs and help boost local economies over the long term. We know that RGGI has already worked in 10 other states where it has created new jobs, reduced electricity prices, and generated billions of dollars of revenue for investment in clean energy projects. RGGI also gives us an opportunity to direct crucial investment to the rural communities most impacted by job loss due to the energy transition from coal to natural gas, and the Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income populations disproportionately burdened by air pollution and climate change. Those communities must be at the top of the list when the proceeds generated by RGGI are appropriated. I have been very impressed with the proposals from Reimagining Appalachia to support communities most impacted by the loss of coal jobs. RGGI would provide key investment to make those proposals possible. RGGI has already been a big success in the states where it is already in place, cutting climate pollution and raising nearly $3 billion to invest in clean energy jobs and other programs. The inevitable shift from fossil fuels to clean energy is already happening here in Pennsylvania. RGGI proceeds can be reinvested to ease the transition for the most impacted communities and to build a clean energy economy for the future. Pennsylvania can't afford to miss out on this opportunity to clean up our environment while creating thousands of family-sustaining jobs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Representative Krueger. Next up, we have Representative Donna Bullock.
Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. And thank you to my colleagues for laying down much of the groundwork about the benefits of RGGI. But honestly, I want to say all the thanks to Mark and Sofia, Mark Dugan and Sofia, who really took all my remarks. They are telling the story of Pennsylvania and why RGGI is so important to Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth, to young families like Mark and his children and his family, and even talking about the generation of of coal and industry in his community, and Sofia, a young person who understands the impact of RGGI today and tomorrow. Yes, RGGI is an opportunity for clean air, improved public health, and clean jobs. But as we've heard earlier, it is also perhaps our most promising opportunity to cure decades of environmental racism that has put communities of color on the front lines of climate crisis, that has put low-income communities on the front line of climate crisis. The same structural racism that created and perpetuated inequitable access to resources, opportunities, power, and wealth, those same structural racism and issues that we talked about that laid to bear those inequities during the COVID-19 pandemic, that structural racism has created parallel inequities in our environmental policies. When you combine those inequities with the climate crisis, it only exacerbates the impact of poor air quality, contaminated drinking water, and other climate-driven events and disasters that disproportionately impact low-income communities and communities of color. More than 1 million Black Americans live within half a mile of a natural gas facility, and more than 6.7 million Black Americans live in counties with oil refineries. Black Americans are 75% more likely than white people to live in a fence-lined community that is near commercial facilities that produce noise, odor, traffic, or emissions that directly affect the population. Because of structural racism and inequities, these communities often lack the resources or the political influence to push back on bad environmental policies, to fight the siting of hazardous facilities in their backyards, or on the other hand, advocate for the benefits of good environmental practices like RGGI. But RGGI gives us an opportunity to change that. We can decrease the burden of Black and low-income fence-line communities, improve health outcomes, and empower environmental justice communities across the Commonwealth. With the profits of RGGI, we can invest in systemic environmental and energy justice and bring resources to these communities. The Wolf administration has already proposed the Environmental Justice Communities Trust Fund. I support this fund because it will target investments that will minimize and correct adverse environmental impacts, empower those communities, and foster economic opportunities. This fund will make investments in environmental cleanup, water quality improvement, air quality improvement, economic development projects, and the creation of new jobs. And this is where RGGI gives us yet another opportunity, an opportunity to build political power within the environmental justice community. Give them the opportunity to decide where these funds are invested. Give them not just a seat at the table, but they should be leading the discussions on design, implementation, and continuation of our state's participation in RGGI. RGGI is also an opportunity to improve the health and build wealth in these communities by monitoring the impact of RGGI from the beginning, not after it's all said and done, but from the beginning, and implementing it with an equity lens. We can ensure that low-income communities and communities of color are not left behind once again, that they will benefit from RGGI's success like everybody else. Yes, we will have clean air, but we should also have cleaner jobs, like my colleague Leanne Krueger mentioned, and opportunities to build clean small businesses and to otherwise economically benefit from the state's participation in RGGI. Like I have heard before, could this green wave lift all boats? I look forward to joining my colleagues, the many advocates across the Commonwealth, Sofia and Mark, as we continue to support RGGI, its implementation, and of course, monitoring it every step of the way to make sure it fulfills its promises to our communities. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of today's press conference.
Thank you so much, Representative Bullock. We will now turn to our final speaker of the day, Representative Greg Vitale, Chair of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Representative Vitale.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks to the organizers, and thanks for including me, and special thanks to Mark Shebas, because he provides so much valuable technical analysis, not only on RGGI, but on environmental issues generally that let legislators like us do our job. So special thanks to Mark. RGGI is the most important thing Pennsylvania can do this term to address climate change. I mean, there are more important things, but Pennsylvania, given its political climate, won't do them. And there are things that are very doable, but not as meaningful. So this is the most important thing we can do. As Mark said, RGGI is on track to be approved by the Environmental Quality Board sometime later on this year, but there are two bills that are geared up to block RGGI. One is Senate Bill 119 by Senator Pittman, and that would stop RGGI in its tracks. That just moved out of the Senate Environmental Committee, so that's an active bill. Senate comes back May 10th, so keep your eye out on that. The second is House Bill 637 by Representative Struzzi, which was House Bill 2025 of last year. Pretty much the identical bill, again, just knocking RGGI right off its tracks. These bills are ridiculous in their construction, and people should be aware of that. Essentially, what they do is require the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, to chase its own tail for many months, ending up in the same place it started. In summary, it requires DEP to draft a bill to address climate change, require 4 public hearings, have an extensive report requiring it to provide information it has no means of getting. And then after all this is done, that entitles it to request a member of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee to introduce a bill, which I could do tomorrow. It's absolutely ridiculous, and people need to know that. There's one intent to these two bills, and that is to block RGGI. Now, unfortunately, these bills either will pass easily, and we've seen that because House Bill 2025 of last term passed easily. The key is going to be the override vote. We need to hold in the House or in the Senate, at least we have to prevent them from getting 2/3 of either chamber. Now that's going to be really important. It's going to be really hand-to-hand combat. You're not going to get the conservatives. They're voting for this. The key are going to be suburban Republicans and Democrats who are affiliated or have allegiances to labor. Regrettably, the AFL-CIO endorsed the Struzzi bill last term, and that's something Democrats have to deal with. Right now, it's not about theoretical arguments. It's about the votes. It's hand-to-hand combat. You really need to let your legislators know that you are watching them. You are watching how they vote on these issues. Activists need to be strategic. Environmental organizations need to be strategic. We need to stop either of these two bills from passing. It's really about the votes right now. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Vitale. Thank you again to all the speakers today. Those were very compelling remarks. I will now turn it over to John from Shelley Lyons for the question and answer period.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks to all our great speakers. Here's what we want to try to do. Everybody's time is very valuable. So we have a bunch of folks on the line, some press and some advocates. So it would be very helpful. Number one, you can click the raise your hand button if you have a question. Let me say that first. So we can unmute you. You can ask your question out loud. The hope here is that we can allow reporters to the front of the line here. So if you are a reporter and you have a question, please click the raise your hand button and we can unmute folks, and we will, it would be also helpful if you could just introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, where you're from. It looks like Paul, you got the first question, so I'm going to click the allow to talk button here, Paul. Hopefully you'll be unmuted. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, I'm Paul Goff from the Pittsburgh Business Times. I wanted to talk a little bit about the concerns that some of the communities, particularly in Greene County, Mark, we live in the same town actually, but some of the concerns that Washington County and Greene County, Indiana County, they have concerning what kind of opportunities there are going to be for them in the clean energy economy. A miner makes $75,000, $90,000 a year. We know what how the work toward getting them coding jobs went. What can you tell them this time, and try to help them understand what you're trying to do, and maybe help them more, I suppose, is the best.
Yeah, any of the members want to jump in, and then also maybe, I mean, Mark, if you have thoughts as well, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'll lay it out to anybody that wants to answer, and I can speak after, or I can go now.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something, that I empathize with and understand. Coal and industry as a whole in Greene County and Washington County, and really just southwestern Pennsylvania is, like I said, a way of life. A lot of people aren't comfortable with, any type of change to that industry. I don't necessarily think it's the end all be all for the coal industry. I don't think it's going to shut down the doors of the coal industry overnight if RGGI passes. But at the same time, the coal industry's injured a lot of people and costs a lot of lives to a lot of people, in my opinion. So, how much money do you have to make a year to, sustain your family in Washington and Greene County, and, still have a good job to go to? I'm not a policymaker, I'm not sure. But, I fully support RGGI and doing anything we can to protect workers' health and, their right to work.
Any of the members want to jump in before we go to next question?
Well, I'd encourage you to take a look at the work of Reimagining Appalachia, because we need a worker-centered approach for sure. And I have heard folks suggest that coal miners could take on coding jobs. I don't think that is something that I've heard from my colleagues who represent those districts that's really a practical solution. And one of the reasons why I'm encouraged by RGGI is if these jobs are on a decline anyway because of market forces, RGGI actually would generate $300 million in proceeds to provide for a just transition. And that's why I'm encouraged that the DEP is engaged in a pretty robust stakeholder conversation right now, getting input from workers in these impacted communities about exactly where the money could go to make sure that family sustaining jobs exist in the very places that have already lost coal jobs.
Yeah, and I might add, I mean, it is really, as economies evolve, impossible to just sort of replace the exact same job in the exact same place sometimes. But I think it's important to note with the two petrochemical bills the House and Senate have passed, one with regard to the Shell cracker plant and the other most recent bill, we have and also are creating many jobs in Western Pennsylvania. I might also note that there is hope in the Biden stimulus package with regard to monies for well plugging, orphan and abandoned wells. I think now you're dealing with the same region and approximate skill set of some of the workers who are being displaced. That is important. And as Leanne mentioned, this $300 million in annual proceeds can be used and will be used for the creation of good jobs in the renewable energy field.
Thanks, Paul. I don't want to go on it unless I want to make sure you had a chance for if there's a follow-up, or I know you're still on mute.
I'm fine. Thank you very much for the responses.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. All right. So any other press with raise your hand button, you can click that and we can unmute you. All right, Rachel, I'm gonna click the allow to talk button. Hopefully you can then unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Rachel McDevitt,
Go ahead.
Impact, Pennsylvania. Can you hear me?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, we got you, Rachel. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to ask, especially for the panelists who have talked about environmental justice, what is sort of lacking in the RGGI regulation at this point, or what's lacking in the legislative conversations? Like, what do we need to make sure that those investments are used wisely and that those communities are helped?
I'll just, thank you, Rachel. I'll just mention that as was mentioned in our presentations, there is a need for there to be a RGGI revenue spending bill, a legislative bill that will determine how the RGGI revenue is spent. And representatives, members of the environmental justice communities need to be at the table to decide how that money is spent. And a significant portion of it should go to the communities, the Black, Brown, and low-income communities that have been most negatively impacted by carbon emissions and the climate crisis, and will continue to be so. So, this is a bill that, that is, coming and is the key to, for the legislature, together with the people, to determine how we're going to spend that money to help people in the environmental justice community and across Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Senator Committa. I think she hit, the major point is about investment, putting the resources in those communities. And then the second point is making sure that those communities have a seat at the table in that decision-making process with not just regards to the fund, but also additional policies or implementation for RGGI. And lastly, I would say there needs to be structure around how we are monitoring RGGI every step of the way, along with a process to make adjustments. So, that monitoring of the impact of RGGI in all of our communities, to make sure all of our communities are benefiting from the gains, the success of RGGI. So that would be part that I would like to see put into statute and not just mentioned, but we do have the fund that I know the governor's proposing, and I think there are some other things we can do to empower those communities in this process in a very systemic way.
Yeah, I might just add, when I think of environmental justice, which is a very serious issue, and it just simply has to be addressed vigorously, I'm thinking more of conventional air pollutants, SOx, NOx, and things like that. And in addition to water pollution and other things that are these plants that emit that are located in these poor areas, and that has to be addressed. But when I think of RGGI, I think more of CO2, which it's more a global issue, not a conventional pollutant per se. So there is a difference between the two, reducing CO2. And while it's important to be creative in the use of the $300 million in RGGI proceeds, I do think it's important that you have to understand that most of the, well, not most, and Mark can kind of parse this out for me because he's the expert, but much of the CO2 reduction is going to come from using those $300 million in such a way that reduces CO2 in sending solar, energy efficiency, and so forth. So I think they're important issues, but they're nuanced issues and have to be, we have to kind of understand that.
All right, thank you, Rachel. I want to make sure just see if you had a follow up. I don't want to cut you off.
I would just ask, and sorry if I have this background noise behind me. When can we expect to see some details, I guess, in how money could be distributed?
I would say that there will be a bill introduced soon.
And Rachel, this is Mark Shebas. On the regulatory side, on the DEP side, they are working on, I think, a draft investment framework right now. I don't know the timeline for that to be introduced. Yeah, I think it will be at some point after the final regulatory language comes out. I think we can expect that late spring or summer probably.
Thanks, Rachel. I think you're you're still muted, but I hope if you want another follow up, then feel free to raise your hand again. All right, so Loannis, I am going to you got your hand up. I'm going to unmute. All right, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Wonderful. This is you can call me Yanni Pasakis with the Central Penn Business Journal out of Harrisburg. And what do you say in response to those who don't support RGGI because of the possible energy costs that might show regarding Pennsylvania's small businesses at a time where many are still bouncing back from the pandemic?
So yeah, Mark, do you want to?
Sure.
Actually, I saw you unmuted. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. Thanks for the question, Yanni. The costs obviously are a big concern, but the DEP's modeling projects that although costs will rise, wholesale electricity costs will rise a small degree initially. In the longer run, costs will actually come down, and that's because of the investments that Chair Vitale talked about. The money that the DEP can get from the proceeds of the allowance auctions can be invested into energy efficiency and other things that decrease energy costs. And energy efficiency is a huge part of this solution, because the more energy we use, the more expensive it is. That's basically a function of the PJM electricity markets, the way they work. They call power plants online according to demand, lower cost plants first, higher cost plants later. So the less electricity we're using, the more we avoid those high electricity costs. So the investments that we can make through RGGI into energy efficiency can really keep those costs lower, both on the wholesale side, the PJM market side, and on the level of retail bills through programs like the weatherization assistance programs and other energy efficiency programs that the DEP is exploring. Happy to talk more with you offline and share some materials if that would be of interest.
Thank you, Mark. I'll reach out.
Thanks, Yanni. Appreciate it. All right, so let's see. Do we have any other press questions? Going once. Going twice. And all right, so I think we have exhausted the press questions. Mark, let me turn it back over to you to wrap things up, and let me just thank our speakers once again for being willing to join us. We really appreciate it because everybody is very busy. So it is it's great that you could join us. And Mark, let me turn to you.
Yeah, I just also want to thank all the speakers for taking the time to do this and briefly open the floor to them for any final statements that they have. Right.
The time to act is now. As my colleagues have said, there's a number of bills that we're tracking in Harrisburg. The DEP is also, looking for input exactly on how to spend this money, and seeking input from impacted communities. So this is the time to make your voices heard. And thanks again for joining us.
Yep, as Leanne said, Senate Bill 119 and House Bill 637. Either of them can move. We have to put a full court pressure on our legislators to block them. Carolyn, I was going to mention, I filed about a half a dozen amendments to the House bill. You're welcome to steal them for the Senate bill if you want.
Thank you very much. I will take a look and take action. And yes, I echo my colleagues. Now is the time to act. We have been acting. We need to keep speaking out and moving forward. As we know, coal is in decline without RGGI. Workers will be without jobs in that industry without RGGI. What RGGI will do is help to generate revenue for the coal communities and other environmental justice communities across Pennsylvania, and will also make our air and water cleaner for everyone. And that is and cleaner jobs as well. So now is the time to act. Thank you to everyone who has been speaking out, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. And I see some questions in the chat. We'll answer those. And if this gets closed before they're all answered, feel free to reach out to us outside of the Zoom. Thanks very much, everybody.